Hey, and welcome back. It's been quite a while. New surroundings. For the first time, I'm doing this in the room instead of out where I normally do. Just wanted to give you kind of a change of pace. You can see my room is a little bit dirty, but okay, you can see my weapons in the background. Recently in my class, we had kind of an interesting discussion, and I thought I'd like to make it kind of publicly available to get some comments for other people to see how you feel about it. The point of the discussion was essentially this. We had talked about Japanese advertisements, and I'd asked my students, have you ever seen them? And some of them had, but the basic point we were trying to make was Japanese advertisements are crazy. They're very, very fast-paced. They're often nonsensical. They just leave you feeling, like your mind is in a whirlwind after seeing them. And so what I was trying to get through to them was this discussion that we had previously had. In case you may or may not know, I was part of the strike that was in Los Angeles for the teachers union. And during that time, the kids had nothing really good to do. They had done a few things, but nothing really significant towards their education. And so what I was doing and what I was trying to explain to them was the importance of that versus the importance essentially of if you have nothing fun to do, or if you have nothing kind of guiding your steps on a daily basis, that kind of represents chaos. And what we do in the classroom on a daily basis as we build our knowledge base, that represents order. And I was trying to get them to think about those two things. And it was really hopeful for me when I actually heard these kids saying that, yeah, it's actually good to be in school. And it's actually good to be learning something and, making a contribution to my own knowledge and my own growth. And it's good to hear that, because you'd think most kids are just about chaos. Okay, I want to do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. But these kids actually had kind of sat down and they had thoughtfully understood that if you just do whatever you want to, whenever you want to, it might be fun sometimes, but it's really unsustainable. So, according to that, and according to that kind of thing, I decided to tell them a story, something that happened to me in Japan, and just, some general knowledge, and I want to share that with you. So basically, I had started by saying, does anybody here in the classroom, or has anybody in the classroom ever seen Japanese advertisements? And some of them had said yes, because, they watch anime and those things. And the thing is, if you watch a Japanese TV show, and if you see typical advertisements, they're crazy. They're at this blistering fast pace. They say really weird things, and, it all seems very random. You feel like your mind is in this kind of whirlwind, right? And I was telling them the story about when I was in Japan, there was this advertisement that I saw, and, going back and forth as to, like, repetitiveness versus, like a burst of creativity, a one-time kind of creativity, which one is better? And I was telling them the story of this advertisement that I had seen. And on the one hand, the advertisement perfectly did its job. Advertisement is there to get you to memorize it, and I memorized it. I knew it, but because of the way they had structured things, I was so furious with the company at the way they had done their advertisement. That to this day, I refuse to buy anything from that company, even though I know, what they are and what they did. So basically, I saw this advertisement, and the structure was this. There was a blurb about a product, followed by a jingle, followed by a blurb, followed by a jingle, followed by a blurb, followed by a jingle. Okay, 3 times in a row, these actors were sitting there, in front of the camera, doing the same thing 3 times. And I felt really insulted by that, because they don't really care about who you are as a person. They don't really, respect you as an adult making decisions. What they're really saying is, if I do things this way, get them, get these idiots to remember our song, there'll be a marginal percent chance that they might go out and buy the product because they know the song, And it worked. to their credit, to this day, I have that song in my head. I know what it is. But as a counter to that, I'm so insulted by how they did it that I refuse to, number one, sing the song, and I refuse, number two, to say what the product is. But the commercial was something like this. It was like they would say something. Buy it. It's great. It's wonderful. Do 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 do. Just the stupid song. Okay? Go out and get it. On sale now. Do 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 do. You should go out and get it. What a fantastic product. Blah 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 blah. And I just felt so insulted by that. And I wondered how other Japanese were. I don't know if the other Japanese were kind of used to that kind of tactic, but I hated it. I couldn't stand it, and as I say, as a result, it kind of annoys me to this day. So that kind of goes back to something else that's in Japanese history, which I was trying to explain to my students. So there's a prayer which in Japanese is called the Nembutsu, and when I was learning it, this was, again, maybe 2006 when I was in university, and my teacher was telling me about it. He was saying that the Nembutsu is something like, the way that it's used, at least in Japanese storytelling, is something like, maybe back in old, 1950s, 60s cowboy movies or something like that, John Wayne movies or something like that, they would use the good book, There would be some villain, and then the good guy says, well, all you have to do is settle down, read the good book, and if they would read the Bible, they would suddenly turn into a moral person, and they would stop being a villain. Well, the Nembutsu was something like that in Japan. So you'd see a lot of plays, you'd see a lot of stories where some character would say, particularly there was this one that our teacher had introduced us to. It was a story of these thieves. So they had been robbing from place to place, and then one of the guys, there was a group of three, one of them had robbed this place, but in doing so, I don't remember exactly, but he had somehow turned a new leaf because the person that he had robbed had got him to read the Nembutsu. The Nembutsu is kind of this Buddhist prayer that you say. And it's a very small, simple prayer. Maybe I'll put a link below. You can see what it is. It's a very small thing, but again, the idea is once you say it, it leads to enlightenment. And that was kind of the idea, is, you take this immoral person like a thief, and then once you get them saying the Nembutsu, they turn their ways around and they start becoming a moral person. So that goes back to ancient Japanese. Again, it's this idea in Buddhism, this sacred prayer. And there was different schools of thought. And again, I don't know the schools off the top of my head, but there were different schools of thought on how to approach that. One of them was, you say the Nembutsu 10,000 times. Okay, you just say it repetitively, you say it over and over again, you say it as part of your daily discipline. Another school of thought was, you don't say it 10,000 times, you say it one time. But that one time you say it from the very, very bottom of your heart. And in doing so, that will lead to enlightenment. So I put that question to my students, and I put it to you now, is what do you personally think is more effective, more true? Which way is better? Do you think it's better to say a certain prayer 10,000 times? Or do you think it's better to say it one time from the very bottom of your heart? Now you can imagine the feedback that I got from most people, especially because they're young kids. So it's hard for them to think deeply. I'm not saying that they're dumb. They're young, So the first thing that they latch onto, it seems what the first thing that they hear and the first thing that they process is one time. Yeah, that sounds great, one time. But what they're not really hearing or not really processing is from the very bottom of your heart. And some person had said to me, how about you say it 10,000 times from the bottom of your heart? And it's like, well, yeah, in theory, that sounds great. But when do you do something from the very bottom of your heart? In your daily life, how often do you do something from the very bottom of your heart? Typically, you're just kind of rolling along, right? It takes a very stressful moment to get you to focus on something. It takes like either pain or it takes either, fear typically to get you to focus on something. I think a lot of times, if you think about it, you take so much of your life for granted, and the only time you focus on it, the only time you come face to face with your true feelings in the bottom of your heart, is when you're in danger of losing that thing. So this idea of saying it 10,000 times from the bottom of your heart sounds good on paper, but it just doesn't seem like a realistic thing. But yeah, you can imagine most people said, it's great to say it one time from the bottom of your heart. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying, think about that. Now, again, what I was tying this back to, when I was tying back to everything, when I'm tying back to, present day modern education in Japan, what would you say is the dominant philosophy? And it's pretty obvious. The obvious philosophy, the way that most Japanese live their lives, is say it 10,000 times. Repeat it over and over and over again, and eventually it will lead to enlightenment, or at least it will lead to learning. And I think for a lot of Americans, we kind of bucket that idea. We don't really want to say things 10,000 times. We don't want to be repetitive. We don't want to say the same thing over and over and over again, because there's a reality to the fact that it dulls the point, I was also pointing out to them that the same kind of thing could be said for the phrase, I love you. You can say it absolutely from the bottom of your heart, or you can say it 10,000 times, and, maybe prevailing thought is, I'd like to hear it just once from the bottom of the person's heart. But, again, as I said, the number one thing I was pointing to them and I was trying to get them to realize is, even if 10,000 times... And again, we're just using 10,000 times as a metaphor. You don't have to say it literally 10,000 times, but many, many times, it becomes a metaphor, for doing things in a repetitive fashion. And I think that a lot of Americans instantly bucket that idea. And they say that I don't want to do things 10,000 times, I want to do them just one time. But at the same time, how can you argue with the results of the Japanese education system? As much as it bothers you, or as much as it seems boring to just do things over and over again, Japan, I've been teaching Japanese for several years, I've been studying Japanese for several years, and it's a very, very hard language to pick up. It's a very, very hard language to write. That being said, Japanese are some of the most fluent or some of the most literate people on the planet. There's a very, very low rate of illiteracy amongst the Japanese, even though their language is extremely hard. And I think a lot of that is, again, due to repetition. And I was telling the kids this one more story about when I was there. When I was living there in Japan, I was there for the 2011 earthquake. And in fact, I told this story on a previous video. I was teaching a lesson at the time, and it was just one of the most that was the strongest earthquake I'd ever felt. Like, I'm from California, I've felt earthquakes before. That was the strongest. That was the first time that I recognized, the walls around me are pretty flimsy, and earth is very, very strong, and it could destroy, the building pretty easily. And I I had to walk home because after that the trains were down. It's like 5 hours, like walking home, like following the train tracks, like to finally get home that day. And when I got home, this is the funny part, is like, for those who were there in Japan at the time, they know what I'm saying. Anybody else, you wouldn't know it, and it would blow your mind, like, to actually see it, like, happening in real time. They had these commercials ready and available to go. And, like, I'd never I'd never seen any of these commercials. It was a huge disaster that was going on in Japan, right? And so everybody's like got their eyes glued to the TV. They want to see the news. They want to see, are we going to be okay? What are we going to do? And every single program that you saw, and there was very few because it was mostly a very, very focused, very strictly controlled, tightly regimented news process. But eventually there were commercials. And I keep laughing. It's funny, but it's also just so unbelievable on the part of the Japanese. There were these commercials that were going on that they just had ready and queued up, and they were just unbelievable. They were commercials that kept saying, be kind to the people around you, help the people around you. Everybody needs your help. We can do this together, which is a beautiful message. Perfectly fine. The reason I'm laughing is because the scale of the repetition was unbelievable. Like I could sit here and describe it, but you wouldn't believe it unless you saw it. So imagine a commercial, a 30-second spot that's something like this. Young man, he's sitting on a train, or, he's sitting on a seat in the train. He sees an old lady. So then he stands up and offers his seat. The older person kindly sits down. Be kind to each other, la la la. And then it happens again. And then the commercial repeats again. And again. And again. And again. And then it goes back to the news. The news spot is on for about 5 to 7 minutes or whatever it is. And then it goes back to the young man giving up his seat to the old lady again. And again. And again. And again. And I'm laughing, but at the time, again, I was staring, just jaw dropped, as far as, how much repetition was involved in this. You literally, I could sit here and describe it, but unless you're actually there, you can't understand how many times they repeated that stupid commercial. Again, I'm just saying stupid now. It was a good sentiment, obviously, right? Help each other in need. It's just that the level. I mean, literally, you wouldn't believe me. It was commercial block after commercial block, hour after hour, day after day, for 3 weeks in a row. You can't believe how often these commercials would happen. Ask anybody who was there at the time, and they'll tell you, because that's all there was as far as viewing options. If you wanted to know what was going on, you had to deal with those commercials, and those commercials were unbelievably repetitive. Now, again, repetition drives you crazy sometimes. Too much order drives you crazy sometimes. And again, I've said this before, but my philosophy has always been the Tao. Ever since 2005, when I took this class on religions, it really changed my life, but I focused everything down to one religion that just seemed to make a lot of sense to me, which was Taoism. These days, there's a big yin-yang symbol in my classroom, and I use that to point out a lot of things to, the young people around me. I use it to show them, Eastern wisdom, because it's so brilliant. You can go over the meanings of that simple sign so much. It says so much, and it was a symbol created literally thousands of years ago. So, for me, you can complain and you can, want to get rid of that over repetitiveness, and I get it. Sometimes spontaneous bursts of emotion really get to the core of your heart, and sometimes repetitive actions, they just make you a robot who doesn't really feel what he's doing. It's just that I've done this process time after time after time, so in either case, I was really proud of the fact that my students, because you would expect young people to just say, I hate anything that's repetitive, but I think that they saw the point, especially because the way that I teach my class. Again, I haven't said this on camera, but there was a couple of funny moments in my class where I would finally tell them, do you know who I am? And they would like look around like, what the heck is he saying? Do you know who I am? Like, yeah, do you know who I am? What do you mean? What is he talking about? And I said, yeah, I give them some clues. Yeah, I'm in Reseda. Again, Reseda is the place that I teach. And I teach Asian culture. I teach it pretty much from the book, and I teach it in a pretty much repetitive fashion. Do you know who I am? And most of them didn't get it because it was before their time. But one student last year, he was a senior, and he finally got it. He's like, oh, I know who you are. Who am I? You're Mr. Miyagi. And I said, that's it. That's who I am. I'm in Reseda. I'm teaching, Japanese culture, doing it repetitively. Again, Daniel-san, he did not like to go through wax on, wax off. He thought it was boring. But at the end of it, he learned something. At the end of it, that repetitive wax on, wax off, paint up, down, up, down. He thought it was super boring. But when he did it, he learned something. And so that's what I taught my students, and I think a lot of them really got it. Like, even if order can be boring, it's completely worth it. Because chaos is just unsustainable, but sometimes necessary. That's why the yin and the yang are there. You can't say that chaos is a bad thing. You can't say that, breaking free from chains and breaking free from repetitiveness is not important, because sometimes it really, really is, to say something from the very, very bottom of your heart. I love you. I don't want to picture the idea of losing you. I don't want to be sarcastic. I don't want to say things that just lead us into argument after argument. I want you to know that you've been the best. You took care of me all those years. You helped me create a beautiful child. And I know you never watch my videos, so you'll never see this, but I said it. And I meant it. I really, really love you.